Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of DataBytes. We are really excited to have you back. Great response on the first episode. We're approaching actually a couple thousand views as we tape this, so we're really excited to get rolling and to get some more information. Chris can give a wave. He's the doctor of mustache from Washington. He introduced himself last time. And then Jason, a lot of you guys know for Jason from Suds Creative. But Harold, take a couple. So we've got a guest star today. Harold, just give ourselves a real quick introduction. A lot of folks probably know Harold in the industry. He was the numbers guy for DRB for many years. But maybe Harold, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. My name's Harold Guthrie. I've been with DRB Systems for about 25 years. Held a number of positions here at DRB Systems, done a number of jobs. As Dan said, I published a number of articles as the numbers guy doing some studies, and you can find those on our website. And most currently, I work with some of our largest accounts in the sales department.
Very good. A little bit later, Harold's going to talk to us about, he's kind of got a doctorate in data around the ARM methodology and getting recharges to work and everything else. So he's going to update us on some things he sees in the industry. I'm going to go ahead and begin to share my screen now, and we will jump right into it. First of all, there was a couple of things that really came out of the presentation or the discussions last week that I want to follow up on. There were some kind of action items or takeaways that we had. First of all, it's all stuff that, data is driving us places. So everything that we do in these discussions will be about data driving us. One of the things that came up that Chris was really showing us, and Jason talked about it too, is changing habits and routines. We talked about how do we get consumers to include car washing in their new routines. Jason, why don't you take that one first, and I got a follow-up question for Chris.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. Obviously, the peak times during the week, during a typical non-pandemic, decent weather week would be, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And what we're starting to see is that there really is no weekend now, as everybody is mostly working from home, or the states are shut down. There's restaurants, bars aren't open. There's really no weekdays either. So it feels like everything's kind of blended. So what we're seeing in the data is those peaks are actually starting to flatten out. And so people are washing, the behavior has changed in that they're washing at different times during the day or different times during the week as well. So what's fun about that is we're starting to see some organizations open back up that were previously shut down. And I think, as you're out locally and you're driving around and you see activity at a car wash, car wash is, if the car wash is open, it's one of the things that you can actually do. It's one of the things that you can actually still do and maintain, enough safety. So it's really interesting to see how the peaks have flattened out on the weekends and times of, customer behavior and the times of the day and the days of the week that they're washing have completely kind of inversed.
So what are some things that we could do from a marketing perspective? What are some thoughts? Like, what are some pitches that folks could make to their customers to make car washing part of their new routine or part of getting them out of the house or things like that? Have you been faced with the challenge? Have you seen good things that folks are doing in this area that basically say, hey, it's a chance to get your kids out of the house. It's actually something you could do, take control of your life. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the funny thing is, and you're absolutely right. So we've kind of turned into a public relations company as we're just having to understand, consumer sentiment and keep an eye on, social behavior and social commentary. What's happening is we're having people reach out to car wash operators and ask them to open if they had been closed. And what that kind of told us that, people would like to do something. And that's exactly what they've been saying is, I just need to get out of the house. I want to maintain some type of normalcy. So it's something that you can do, put your kids in the car and go through the car wash. You don't have to go to the grocery store, just get out of the house, do something. Chris was joking around about, I don't even know if I want to say it. Actually.
Go for it.
You do.
Okay.
You do.
So we were joking around about a client in Las Vegas, and that it's actually could be the best show in Vegas right now because everything is shut down. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's something that you can do. It's fun. You get out of the house. And also, we talk a lot about what happens when you feel like you've accomplished something, and there's a hormone that gets released that makes you feel good. And it's the reward center of the brain that, when you accomplish something, you feel like you were productive in a world right now that's pretty chaotic, and it's tough to be productive outside of the home. That can be a really good thing and really lift morale.
Chris, you sent me an email. You listed some, like I call it a microcosm of data in great, great detail. Use the term inverted weekend. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, this was really interesting, and a lot of it, we're benefiting right now from our relationship, obviously, with DRB, in that we can access a lot of time series data. So not just the quantities of how many people are coming in, but when are they coming in? As we knew this pandemic was going to shift behavior, we were all just kind of watching to see how that would manifest. And Jason hit the nail on the head, that the days of the week are becoming less and less relevant. And in fact, grabbed a cluster of sites, and what we saw was where the weekends would have been your historical highs are now the lows, and days like Tuesday and Wednesday are all of a sudden the favorites. So it's almost inverted from what we used to be seeing. And of course, where this becomes very interesting and something to really think about is we used to put everything through that lens of where our bottlenecks are, everything from staffing to where do people need to be. And sites really need to pay close attention to that, because we need to shift and we need to listen to what folks in your community are trying to tell you in terms of how they're living with this. And I love the challenge of trying to integrate with these new patterns. So we were talking about to another site where we look at where do people go in addition to on the same days or within the same hour that they go to a car wash. And the Olive Garden was coming up for this gentleman's site, and it was confusing initially. But what I showed him in the data was it's date nights. Within a specific segment of people, they tend to wash their car before they go on dates, and they tend to go on dates to the Olive Garden where he lives. So that got us thinking, people are still doing carryout. So attach yourselves to these other behaviors. So you can do carry out and clean, you can do a dine and shine, you can do whatever it is, attach yourselves to these other things that are still happening, and give people a little course of action that they can do and still have a little fun. Right now, dinner and a show might just be the light show in your tunnel.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, there's a way to, and there's a lot of local restaurants that do carry out that'll hand out flyers, things like that. There's a lot of things to do. So I love the idea, both things you guys mentioned, attaching to the routine. The biggest routine, the newest routine right now is carry out and grocery shopping at different times. So attach yourself to that in some way in your messaging. And then to Jason's point, just get the kids out of the house. It's something to done. You can accomplish. You can still accomplish something. You can sanitize the outside of your car, things like that. So as you think about marketing, those are things that the data points us to. The other one that we talked about last week, and then we'll jump into the new data, was the fact that people, when they think locally, they're more willing to get out and do things. Chris, you showed us a lot of interesting data on that. But then when they think nationally and they watch the news and everything else, it's just really affecting them. So any thoughts about how to get people to think a little bit more locally and just we don't want them to put themselves in jeopardy by any stretch, but driving to a car wash that you're not going to interact with folks is pretty safe. Any thoughts on how we can, or ideas about how to get people to think locally and inject that into their lives? Jason or Chris, either one.
Yeah, I think that, the interesting thing is I don't know if you're going to get somebody out of their house specifically to go to the car wash, right? But once they're out of their house,
I do.
and except for Chris, once they're out of their house and they see activity at a car wash, activity creates more activity. So Chris talks a lot about something called frequency blindness, which is, if you've been driving by that same car wash for, a number of years, pretty soon you just go blind to that car wash being there. So even doing some things at the road that are, temporary signage or something that's a little bit more disruptive, there's still people out driving around. And when they are out, it's almost like dessert a little, you just see, the car wash is actually open. It's something that I can do. And if they see activity, it's likely to generate more activity. Even if that activity is monthly membership for the most part right now, Monthly members create activity, and activity creates opportunities. It attracts retail members. It's something called group effect.
We actually have a local car washer that actually, he believes in your group effect concept a lot. They just parked a car in front of the one gate, and so there's a car there, and then people will go in, they'll automatically drive to the other gate. So that they really are trying to have people see a car and make sure they know they're open. So they're really trying to get after it. It's kind of like the speed traps they used to park the empty police car, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same concept. And they're convinced that it works. We're going to jump right into the data, and then I'm going to just ask some generic questions, and we'll see if Jason can talk a little bit about trends without giving away too much of the future presentation. But when we look at the national take on this, and again, this is just across a few thousand car washes. Jason, what do you see that's changing? Give us the high level trends of what you're talking to, and then we'll jump into some of the kind of what states are up and down and staying the same and things like that. But give us your take on what you see in the data at a high level week to week.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you can see from the graph that the orange represents 2020, the blue is 2019. In 2019, a little bit more inclement weather for that particular week. But what you're starting to see the steep drop off starting to level out a little bit, and I think that's a really good sign. There's a couple things that happened last week, and a number of different states and you'll see when we go state by state, but a number of different states started to open back up. So you started to see car washes open back up. So right now we're looking at Ohio, Pennsylvania. You see that little, check mark, reverse check mark. That's a really, really good sign. So that's hitting the bottom and then coming back up. We fully expect that to continue. You look at Ohio and Pennsylvania in particular, New York, there's a number of other ones, Delaware, Illinois, some of the ones that were really early to shut down. Now they're starting to not peak, but they're starting to level off and start to come back up as sites open up and people feel more comfortable. The more positive sentiment that there is nationally, I think the more comfortability that people have, they start to feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. So as dark as it is right now in a lot of parts of the country, relative to COVID-19, you're starting to see, at least we believe that we're entering into the peak and that we're going to start to see a downslope. And I think that is going to have a really positive effect. As well as I think as a industry, we're starting to wrap our heads around some of the messaging that is going out when you do open up. And so, things like, being open to members only or being able to communicate really on social channels about how you're protecting your staff and how you're protecting pay stations and limiting human interaction. Car washes might be as insulated as almost any other industry in the country that's retail or consumer driven. So, that's a positive as well. But as you can see right here, Ohio and Pennsylvania, starting to uptick, although it's, still toward the bottom. So, we mentioned Pennsylvania, Ohio, again, two states that were really early to shut down. California was one of the earliest, and you see they just leveled out. Last week they were at the bottom. This week, again, you see that little reverse check mark. It's starting to move back up. Delaware, Illinois, New Jersey, Chicago was one of the first that shut down, LA, and then the entire state of California. So as they come up, they've done pretty well. They come off and sites start to open up. We saw that happen about the middle of last week. So expect that trend to continue upward for both California and Illinois. Those are two big states. And as well as, the Northeast is getting hit pretty hard. There are some sections of the Northeast that are starting to see a slight recovery. And, a couple operators in the Northeast that we've talked to actually they were the ones that had people call out and said, hey, can you guys open up? Are you guys open? I just need to get out of the house. I need to feel normal. I need to do something. So that's, like to Chris's point, just being able to be attuned with what people are saying and what public sentiment is very, very huge. We talk all the time about, our job is not necessarily to predict the future, but our job is to gain a really deep understanding of the present and then react to it. And I think that's what we're starting to see as an industry.
Why don't you talk about some of the states that you think are more in the level off category, and We see a trend in Florida, but I want you to comment on that too. You can see my screen now. Give us. I got a couple slides here on stable states. Stable states. Walk us through those.
Sure. Yeah. So, Kentucky, Georgia, Iowa, all pretty stable relative to where they were in 2019. And again, still down, but nothing like you would see in, last week's data from California and Ohio or anything like that. Florida is a really interesting one because you can see it just almost mirroring 2019. But when you go back to Florida and you look at last year, week 13 of last year, if you were just to take the weekend, they had precipitation on that particular weekend in 2019, which is why you see that drop off. 2020, they had solid weather, no precipitation. So that the dip in 2020 that you see is COVID-19 related. The dip in 2019 was weather related. And you'll see that happen quite a bit, those two factors, and Chris will get into it in more detail. But, that one in particular looks like it's mirroring, but those are completely different weather patterns for those particular weeks.
And also North Carolina and South Carolina kind of look stable too.
Fairly insulated, yes.
Let's talk about a couple states that dipped a little bit or a lot.
Yeah. I mean, so, some of the big ones last week, we talked about New Mexico and Maine that, if you look at a week prior, they hadn't really, they were pretty stable. They hadn't really taken much of a dip. New Mexico had some bad, it started to increase in COVID-19 and they shut down, and Maine as well. Michigan's having a hard time right now, so they've dropped almost down to zero. So again, this goes back to some of the earlier states that were quick to shut down. They're starting to make a little bit of recovery, and what we're seeing right now are some of the laggard states like the Texas and New Mexico's that were slower to shut down. And have started to shut down, and now we're starting to see those effects in the data.
Very good. Chris, you did some research for us last week where you talked about kind of the fact that how many cases are in a state certainly affect things. Why don't you kind of give us an update on that?
Yeah, so last week we looked at it first just kind of on a macro level of what matters more, the amount of active cases that are in the country or in your state. And basically what we found was the overall reaching number of the cases in the country were sort of controlling or suppressing these wash levels more than the levels of the individual states. Now, we had some interesting things happen last week as it relates to the testing of the individual states. Now, as more testing became available, part of what we think we're seeing is a correction, meaning that these cases, of course, had always existed, but now we're becoming aware of them. And as Jason mentioned, there are specific states whose number of cases did tick up significantly between this week and last. But what's interesting, as we think people are just starting to adjust to their new normal, I think that the shock to everyone's system was in large part a psychological shock, which was what's okay to do and what's not okay to do, what's safe and unsafe. And am I going to get sick? So I think people are getting to the point now where we've been sequestered long enough to where I think people are starting to figure out what's going to happen to them and kind of what their social boundaries are in terms of both activities and other things. So we saw more sites open back up, and we saw more people go to those sites. What that did was provide additional insulation for the industry. One of the KPIs we sort of developed or highlighted last time was, according to the trajectory, what's our theoretical zero? Meaning, what's the number of cases it would take for all the washes to fall to nothing? And it was right around 36,000 nationally. Because of this additional insulation, that's now gone up to 65,000, which would be a very high number. New York City is about the only place that's seeing those individualized numbers. So what we've done is we protected our industry against these effects. And by more people, I would say appropriately participating, it benefits all. And this is where this whole thing sort of steamrolls and snowballs up back to one of Jason's just primary elements that he points out, which is that group effect. The more that people understand what their new normal is, the more they will participate in that. And for our industry, we're very lucky, we're very fortunate to be sitting where we are. As we mentioned last week, for certain industries, movie theaters, mass transit, it's going to be a while. and we will absolutely be a part of the front end of this recovery.
So let me put it in layman's terms, maybe, Chris, it appears, based on our data, that the car wash consumer is building resiliency to the reality of what they're hearing on the news and everything else. So as states open up or relax, or even their communities get a little bit more comfortable, it should act relatively quickly from a rebounding perspective, because it's already showing some resiliency in the data. Is that a safe statement?
Yep. In fact, we had a long conversation yesterday trying to find other parallel industries that we could use as bellwethers or leading indicators. And probably more often than not, we will be the bellwether indicator for other industries more than the reverse, because of the high level of personal protection with inside a car, the limited interaction with human beings. And part of it too, when we think about, driving's not going to go down. Driving's going to go up as people elect to drive to wherever they're going to go, as opposed to fly or whatever that might be. And right now, Jason talks a lot about, whether it's pollen or just who knows what's going on in your area, that can only sit there for so long. You park under a tree, you get some bird droppings or whatnot, that cannot sit on your paint for that long. So only becomes a matter of time before you have to participate within this function on some level or another. So we will be part of I'm going to use the term essential, a little bit of a gray area though, but it's something that, we're going to be part of that path.
I think our audience the fact that our consumer will be resilient in this area, I think will give them some comfort. Did you want to mention anything about the Northeast? I put this slide in there. Anything changed in regards to the Northeast at all from your perspective?
So not necessarily, and this is what's been interesting, where the percentage change overall was 1%, meaning we had a 1% uptick in the relationship between the number of cases and the number of washes. So not necessarily significant. Where we are seeing higher levels of significance, where the highest in the country last week was the Northeast, where the Northeast, there was a high correlation between the number of cases and the number of washes. We're seeing that stay relatively still. Whereas in the places like New Mexico and Maine, we're seeing a little bit more pocketing, which again, we think might just be a little bit of a catch up or rebound with the latest testing. But again, people are looking at their own lives and they're starting to get an idea of how they're going to be personally affected. And this is affecting their attitude towards the entire crisis, if I can use that term. So one of the things we're going to talk about is how do we measure how people are feeling? Because it's more important than anything. Confidence.
What a great segue. What a great segue. Chris, walk us through the Call Me Sentimental section where we talk about sentiment and how it may be affecting things.
Absolutely. And this is, again, we're so fortunate to have access to the data that we do have. This is a tactic that was actually employed in the financial world years ago to just see how people were feeling about various companies. And what it's called is a sentiment filter, where we look out, and of course what this is, we're looking out at Twitter. And you can put in here hashtag quarantine. You can search by about any term that people might be chatting about. And what it does is it looks for certain words. Are the words that people are using to describe their situations positive, negative? Are they reflections of anxiety or confidence? And so we can rank and we can actually measure this week to week. It's amazing how much it changes during the time of day. People tend to be more optimistic in the mornings, believe it or not. And they tend, by the end of the day, that's where they tend to feel a little more burnt out, alone in the evenings, and people get a little bit more negative. So you can actually time, if you are still marketing or you're getting your messaging out, you can line up the messaging you're sending out with the points that most correlate to where people are going to be receptive to that message, where they are feeling more positive. So it's a wonderful tool that I'm really glad we were able to introduce this, because this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest indicators of what the velocity of the recovery will be. When people, like anything else in life, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When the country as a whole starts to believe that we're doomed, we're doomed. When they believe this is temporary, that nobody did this to us, it happened and we're all trying to figure it out, and they are confident in the result, we're going to rebound quite quickly. And right now, I had to search hard to even find pockets of negativity. And where I did find it, and I believe we have a map of it, correlates right with the places that got recent information about bumps. So you can see certain parts of California, Arizona, New Mexico is on there as well, to where, yeah, people were feeling a little down. But even if you look up near like Toronto, Chicago, St. Louis, some of these other places, they're still overwhelmingly positive in terms of what are getting out there. Now, it does not take a PhD in psychology to know that most people use social media to complain about things. So the sheer fact that people are being so positive should, quite frankly, make us all proud. I think it's who we want to believe we are.
I
Very
think
good.
too, if you think about, we've kind of turned a corner, going into a corner, if you're driving like a race car or any car, you start to slow down during the corner, going into the corner, and then you can accelerate, as you sense that you're pulling out of the corner, even though you're still in the corner. We're looking for that right now in the data. So as these sites open back up and as usage ticks up, and Chris, what was that stat that 17.5% above the bottom?
Correct.
17.5% usage above the bottom. Once we start to sense that, then we're going to recommend to our clients that we step on the gas. And so we're looking for those trigger points. We're looking for those cues to tell us when we're entering the back half of that corner, so that we can accelerate and try to drive as much traffic to their sites as possible.
Fantastic. Well, look forward to. We'll call it we called our data we presented last week the state baseline. So now we'll use the data you have as the sentiment baseline, and we'll keep on moving forward as we go from week to week. And I think people will be really interested in understanding, when are we accelerating. And what I do like is we have data showing we have a resilient consumer. We can compare that with what's going on with sentiment as things change. I think it's safe to say that, to your point, Jason and Chris, that we could be, hopefully, if we plan accordingly and are ready for that corner, and accelerate coming out of this. We all want to be in action mode when you feel helpless, like you do sometimes in these situations. One of the questions that we got from and we're trying to respond to questions we get, is the difference between there's a lot of folks that have a lot of memberships at their car wash, and there's a lot of folks that don't. Harold's been studying this for years, so I'm going to just put a graph comparison up, and I've just got a couple questions we'll walk through. But this is data that talks about let's see, I'll put it up here, and sites with memberships and sites without memberships. Just a couple questions. First of all, I think you focused on Express, Harold. Why did you focus on Express when you grabbed this data?
Well, I wanted to get the places that had data. So I looked at the express washes, the exterior washes, because they were less likely to be shut down by the states or the local municipalities. And then you have the consumer side, where the consumers at the moment are really more interested in having less interaction with other people. So they're more likely to go to those places where they have less interaction with other people. So that's why I took a look at the exterior sites, to look at those that have memberships and did not have memberships.
Excellent. So it looks like obviously there's lots of trends down right now. If you look at anything in the consumer world, it looks like a pretty stark contrast, left side to right side. Kind of walk me through your take on the percentage of change and why that's happening.
Sure. Well, really up until most recent times, the trend line was really more like a gentle rolling ocean in terms of the trends. But then you can see where the stay-at-home orders, the shutdowns were really putting a lot of pressure on the operators and their businesses. So what we see is the big drop-off, or I'll call it a big wave, right here in the past few weeks hit, and it was worse for those that did not have memberships. Now, that makes a lot of common sense, because what you have is those that have memberships still have revenue coming in, as the folks are automatically charging credit cards, whereas when you don't have those monthly memberships, what you're seeing is a big drop-off, because if people aren't frequenting your car wash as much, you're not getting that pay-as-you consumer as much. Now, what's not shown here in the chart is there's actually kind of a double whammy that the folks on the right are getting. If I would show the x-axis there, you would see that the average revenue per site on the ones without memberships, it starts out about a third lower than the ones that do have memberships. So you take that and you pile on top of that the drop that they've seen here in the past few weeks, and these operators are really getting hit hard.
Yeah, we've seen anywhere between 30 to 50% more of an impact, really, as we go through these last couple of weeks. You mentioned when we were talking, Harold, that the folks are often concerned or reticent about, on the right side, they're not comfortable saying, I've got good paying members, and I'm going to lose money if I convert them. And you've been studying this literally for years. You've looked at thousands of data points. Give me your take on when folks are concerned about losing the one-time customer revenue versus a membership. Just give me your high-level thoughts there.
Well, the operators are concerned about taking their best customers, the folks that are already coming in 2 or 3 times a month, and moving them over to the monthly passes, and they're going to lose revenue on that. And that's true. They are going to lose revenue on those specific customers. But where they pick it up are the customers who think they wash more than they actually do. Most customers do believe that they wash more than they do. And so when they sign up for the monthly pass, they're doing so because they believe they're going to, and I'll put it in quotes, beat the house or beat the dealer. So what you can do is if you take those customers and move them into the monthly passes, they are going to wash more, and you're actually going to turn them into great customers. That's one reason why some folks won't do monthly passes. The other reason is I've heard that they're concerned about seeing their dollars per car drop. And what I would propose is that they should be looking at dollars per customer. And I'll take one very specific example. I was at my church giving blood one evening, and a gal there asked me what I did. And we got to talking about it. She goes, "Oh, you have that car wash in the little town, right over." And I said, "Yes, we do." And she goes, "Oh, I love that place. I used to go in once a month, pay $10 for a wash, but now I joined their monthly pass plan, and for $20 a month, I get to wash every single week." Well, if you're the operator and looking at dollars per car, you're saying, well, I just went from $10 per car to about $5 per car. And that might panic some operators. But if you look at the dollars per customer, what really happened, and I took a look at this data here, that particular customer only washed 8 times in the past year. So that was an $80 per year customer. And what she became was a $240 a year customer. So even though the dollar per wash lowered, she actually is more profitable for that operator. And by the way, she doesn't wash every week. She washed 35 times in that year. But again, she overestimates, as do most consumers, how many times they wash. So more profit to the bottom line, even when you take into account the variable costs of the wash.
Great analogy, Harold. Jason, you and I were talking this week. We've got some partners that we play with in the industry, other suppliers to the space, and you had conversations about comparisons of plans versus non-plans. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but kind of give me your take on this concern about moving from left to right, if you will.
Well, we've never seen it not pencil, and obviously there's a point at which you have to get volume of you have to sell a certain number of unlimited plans to make it make sense. And so, that's really why Suds has been able to grow the way it has, because we focused so much on that conversion opportunity and really less marketing almost, and more direct sales and influencing customer decisions and converting from cash or retail customer to an unlimited. But Harold's absolutely right. When you look at lifetime value of the customer, it's so much higher, and some of the work that Chris is doing on figuring out tenure, the length of time that a person is an unlimited member, and what that benchmark is, that baseline, and how it moves based on different tactics that we can employ, being able to stay in contact with your customers, get them into developing good habits early on in the first 4 or 5 weeks of being on a plan, and then you'll start to see the take rate start to slowly go down. But there's a number of ancillary factors as well that contribute to bottom line revenue. One of them is group effect, again, where you have a lot more activity at the site, and activity creates activity, and activity attracts retail customers. So, by taking, 10 retail customers and converting half of those to unlimited, you're creating an extra, 5 or 6 washes per month. And that's more activity that's actually attracting more retail people from the road. So there's that piece of it as well. And then, what a great, the volatility, reducing the volatility, in, impacts from weather, or even, pandemic type of impacts. When we, anecdotally, we've talked to a number of operators that they could be down around 50% of their total car wash volume, but only down about 20 or 25% from a revenue standpoint. And that is, absolutely huge. And if you were completely retail based, you would really feel those swings in volume. And so car wash volume becomes more of a vanity metric. And we're really focused on revenue and revenue volatility. So there's a number of benefiting factors from, of having ARM customers or unlimited customers, aside from just, the pure monthly recurring revenue. It attracts more retail customers, it reduces volatility. And we're seeing that right now with COVID-19.
I think that it plugs in well. First of all, to clarify, the graphs, we don't have the numbers on there for lots of reasons, but the graphs on here those are actually revenue. Those aren't car counts. Right. That's actually revenue that we see. Again, a random sample, but a very large sample, so it's significantly statistically significant. And I would also say that what I like is, as you hear Harold and Jason talk, they're really speaking our brand purpose or our brand promise here at DRB. We are passionate about car washing. We're passionate about car washing, and our desire is to really help, impact lives, so we create jobs in our economy, and we really support the American dream. I talked to it on the last video. That's our passion. So we really see this as an opportunity for folks to insulate their business, because that's what we want to do. We want to create successful car washers. I've got one more graph I'm going to show, and then I'll open it up. Go ahead, Chris.
One of the things I was going to add to that is, one of the somewhat legitimate fears when you have high membership counts is the suppression of retail dollars during peak times. Because if all your members are there clogging up your lines, then obviously folks who are trying to get in there, we know. But now, the irony of this whole thing is that those peak times are going away.
Yeah.
And it's washing those out in a leveling. And I'll be very curious to see with that rebound as people come back in, if that fear obviously goes away. We very much may have just widened the pie significantly, because with physical limitations are something that are impossible to overcome. You can't build a bigger tunnel tomorrow, so to speak. But when you spread the people out as they're spreading themselves out, we may have some brand new upside potential as a result of this, at least temporarily.
Great point.
Instead of social distancing, it's car wash distancing or vehicle distancing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then lastly, it just validates everything that we've said here. From the credit card perspective, the weekends are getting less lumpy. It's the best way to look at this graph. And that also that in general, transactions are up from last week. We're still getting data for the first few days of the month coming in, affecting these, but it does look from our perspective, that there's a slight increase, very slight. So hopefully we bottom coming out. We'll again, a couple data points. We'll have another data point next week, and we'll look at this again. But it definitely shows out the overall trend that we've talked about, and it also shows that the weekends have leveled out. I'm just gonna open it up if anybody has anything else to say before I close it out. Do you guys have anything else you want to chime in on?
Well, the emails that we've gotten have been amazing. And as Dan kind of mentioned earlier, send us your questions. As we're sort of discovering some patterns here and we're investigating, the whole purpose here is to shine a light on whatever it is that you need us to shine a light on, to either edge fears, raise confidence, gain clarity, whatever it is. We love the interaction. Leave comments in the video, whatever you like, but we love the feedback.
We do. We actually will, maybe if we get a lot of questions in the same areas, we'll try to adjust content for that too. Harold, anything else for the team?
No, but I just appreciate you having me here this week.
This is fun. Oh, I think you'll be a regular, Harold. I mean, it's finally nice to have somebody clean shaven on camera with me. It's fantastic. So, Jason, anything else for the team?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about the opportunity that I think lies in front of us over the next several weeks and several months, because there's a lot of attrition that people are feeling. Unlimited members that have churned out or canceled. We're in a recession. How deep does that recession go? But the opportunity remains to recapture not only the unlimited members that you've lost, but also to really, if you do it right, to pick up market share in areas, because your competitors are bleeding members as well. We may not have that opportunity, or an opportunity as similar to this as in our lifetime again, where you have a number of free agents that are out there and an opportunity to recapture those. So we're really looking forward to helping people not only pick up what they lost, but also gain ground on their competitors and their individual markets.
There's so much out there that it will be, there's great confidence that we return to a normal economy, but for a while it will be a different economy while growing out of, this is an unnatural, if it is a recession, it's an unnatural one, as opposed to financial mechanics doing it. This is hopefully for us, a once in a lifetime thing that we go through. But I just got to tell you, in the videos I've sent to our DRB team and family of associates, I think I've said we are in a strong industry. I'll close with this. We are in a strong industry, and we are excited about where this goes next, and we're really excited to get out of this, what we're in. But we're looking forward to partnering however we can to get people to move forward as we get out and as things change, maybe slowly, maybe quickly. But we'll be tracking every week to see how slowly or quickly it's going, and with more advice in areas of what we can do to take advantage of the opportunities and to be better providers for our consumers. We're excited about helping do that. That's what gets us up in the morning. And a lot of well wishes also from folks about are we okay? Are we healthy? So thank you very much for those. Just keep them coming, keep the interaction coming. Look forward to being with you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.